The council chamber fell silent as the gravity of Elder Thrax's suggestions settled over them. Ambassador Zilith studied the forbidden star map, the coordinates of Earth glowing with ominous red light. The archives contain more than just warnings, she said, stepping closer to the display. There are observations, studies conducted from afar. The human's neural patterns exhibit remarkable adaptability. They solve problems through methods we would never conceive. And they destroy with equal creativity. Counselor Nimeri countered, her luminescent skin pulsing with agitation. The archive footage shows them harnessing atomic energy to annihilate their own cities. That data is ancient, Xylith insisted. Over 70 of their generations have passed. Elder Thrax manipulated the controls, and the star map zoomed outward, revealing the projected path of the Voidborn swarm. 6 more Cerubian worlds lay in their trajectory. We have exhausted all alternatives, Thrax said. Our evacuation ships cannot outrun them. Our barriers cannot withstand them. Our scientists cannot reason with them. The youngest council member, Lyran, spoke up. If we contact these humans, what prevents them from becoming another threat? What if they decide our resources are worth taking for themselves? Zilith moved to the center of the chamber, where the holographic display showed recordings from Cerulean Ivy's final moments. The elegant crystalline structures, home to millions, dissolving into nothingness as the Voidborn passed through them. What resources? She asked quietly. Soon, we will have nothing left to protect. The debate raged through 3 cycles of Cerulean Prime's twin moons. In private chambers, Xylith consulted with the few surviving refugees from the outer colonies. Their testimonies strengthened her resolve. The Voidborn were methodical, unstoppable, and worst of all, accelerating their consumption rate with each world they devoured. When the council reconvened, Xylith came prepared. She activated her personal data crystal, projecting images that few Cerubians had ever witnessed. Human children playing, human artists creating, human healers tending to the wounded. Yes, they fight wars, she acknowledged. But they also build peace. They destroy, but they create with equal passion. Their historical records show them extending help to rivals during natural disasters. They possess something we engineered out of ourselves, the capacity to channel aggression into protection. Elder Thrax studied her with all 4 eyes. You wish to lead this mission? I do, she confirmed. I've spent 20 cycles studying xenoanthropology. If anyone can communicate our need without triggering their predatory instincts, it's me. And if they decide we're not worth saving? Counselor Nimeri asked. Zilith's inner membranes shuddered briefly. The Ceruvian equivalent of a grim smile. Then we'll face extinction, knowing we tried every possible solution. The final vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. That same cycle, Xylith entered the ancient communications array deep beneath the council chambers. Technology preserved from before the Great Modification, when Cerubians still prepared for conflict. The message she composed was elegant in its simplicity. Mathematical constants first, to establish intelligence. Astronomical coordinates next, to provide location. And finally, translated into every Earth language their long-range probes had detected. A simple plea. Help, danger, respond. As the quantum transmission burst forth, aimed precisely at the coordinates of Earth, Xylith performed the ceremony of uncertain return, a ritual not practiced for 2 millennia. She did not know if she was the salvation of her people or their final diplomat. Either way, she had committed them to a path from which there was no turning back. In the observation dome above, Elder Thrax watched the distant stars, wondering which was potentially more dangerous, the Voidborn who sought to consume them, or the humans they had just invited across the galaxy. The UN Security Council's emergency session dragged into its 3rd day. Dr. Eleanor Rice sat quietly as diplomats and military officials from 17 nations argued across the polished table. On the wall-sized display behind her, the alien signal continued its steady rhythm, a constant reminder of what waited 17 light-years away. "We have no way to verify their claims," the Russian representative insisted. "This could be an elaborate trap designed to lure our most advanced technology into deep space. Or it could be exactly what it appears to be," Eleanor countered, rising from her seat. She hadn't slept in 72 hours, sustained only by adrenaline and purpose. A dying civilization's last hope. She gestured to the data scrolling beside the main signal. "The transmission includes detailed stellar cartography. We've confirmed 8 of the 12 star systems they've mapped. Their astronomical knowledge alone is centuries beyond ours." The Chinese delegate leaned forward. "Which makes them potentially more dangerous, not less. Dr. Rice, you're asking us to risk humanity's first interstellar mission on what amounts to a cosmic distress call." "I'm asking us to be who we say we are," Eleanor replied. "Every nation represented here has signed treaties promising humanitarian aid during crisis. Are those promises only valid within our atmosphere?" General Harada scoffed. "Humanitarian aid to humans, Doctor. Not to unknown entities who might view us as anything from potential slaves to potential food." As the arguments continued, Eleanor's secure tablet chimed with an incoming message. It was from Hiroshi Kato, the reclusive tech billionaire whose private space ventures had quietly outpaced government programs for the past decade. The message was brief. *, your conviction is noted. My resources are available if official channels fail, *. The debate might have continued indefinitely if not for what happened next. As the delegates argued, observatories across Earth detected a massive energy burst from the same sector as the distress signal. The unmistakable signature of a star-going supernova. When communications were re-established with the nearest deep space observatory, the footage confirmed their worst fears. The explosion had originated from one of the star systems included in the Cerulean stellar map. That was Cerulean II, Eleanor announced to the stunned council, one of their colony worlds. 3 hours later, with the urgency of the situation now undeniable, Operation Prometheus was greenlit by a narrow margin. A hastily assembled international coalition would prepare Earth's first interstellar mission. The public would be told only that a scientific expedition was being launched. The existence of the alien transmission remained classified. Commander Jackson Wee was extracted from his Alaskan cabin by military helicopter the next morning. His retirement following the Nigerian conflict had been less about choice and more about being quietly removed from public view. The mission directives waiting for him at Andrews Air Force Base made it clear why he'd been selected. "You want someone expendable," he told General Harada bluntly during their private briefing. "Someone whose decisions won't reflect back on Earth if this goes sideways. We want someone who understands that the safety of humanity comes before diplomatic niceties," Harada corrected. "Your record shows you're willing to make those hard choices." Wei studied the mission parameters again. "This ship, it's not ready for deep space. It will be by launch date. We're retrofitting our most advanced prototype with Kato Industries' experimental warp technology. And if we encounter hostile forces..." Harada's expression remained carefully neutral. "The Prometheus is being equipped with defensive capabilities only. This is a rescue mission, Commander." Wei recognized the careful wording. Plausible deniability. They were sending him because his Nigerian tactics had saved thousands of UN peacekeepers by breaking every rule of engagement. "When do I meet the crew?" he asked. "They're being assembled now. 87 specialists, including Dr. Reyes, who decoded the original transmission." Wei nodded. "And if we succeed, if these Ceruvians are legitimate?" For the first time, Harada showed a hint of uncertainty. Then humanity takes its place among the stars. For better or worse. 3 months into their journey, the Prometheus's mess hall had developed its own distinct culture. Crew members no longer sat according to their specialties but had formed unlikely alliances across disciplines. Engineers debated philosophy with xenobiologists. Military personnel learned meditation techniques from the science team. Raj Patel observed this from his corner table, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee. Adversity builds community, he murmured to Eleanor, who had joined him after her shift. 2 months ago, half these people wouldn't speak to each other. Facing the unknown has a way of realigning priorities, she agreed. The ship's psychologist, Dr. Maya Chen, had documented this phenomenon in her weekly reports, calling it expedition syndrome. When humans venture beyond the boundaries of their known world, tribal differences fade against the vastness of the frontier. But not all boundaries had dissolved. Commander Wei maintained professional distance from the crew, taking his meals alone in his quarters and appearing only for duty and the daily briefings. The gulf between military and civilian mindsets remained the ship's most persistent divide. In the observatory dome, Amara Okafor spent her off hours studying not just the Cerubian language patterns, but their art and music samples included in the data packets. The crystalline compositions used mathematical progressions that human music had never explored, harmonies that initially sounded discordant to human ears, but revealed their beauty after repeated listening. Their entire civilization is built on patterns we've never considered, she explained to Dr. Chen during her psychological evaluation. They don't distinguish between science and art the way we do. Their mathematics is their music, is their architecture. The ship's AI announced the beginning of third shift, and crew members dispersed to their duties or quarters. In the training bay, Wei found himself unable to sleep, running combat simulations against hypothetical threats based on the limited data they had on the Voidborn. You should rest, Commander. The ship's medical officer, Dr. Sato, stood at the entrance. I'll rest when we arrive, Wei replied, resetting the simulation. That's still 6 weeks away, assuming the warp drive holds. You need to be at your best. Wei deactivated the program with a frustrated gesture. How do you prepare for an enemy that exists as a conceptual translation? Living voids that consume energy could mean anything from sentient black holes to, I don't even know. Dr. Sato approached, examining the simulations Wei had been running. You're preparing for combat, but what if that's not what they need from us? Then I'll be pleasantly surprised, Wei answered, but I won't risk my crew on optimism. Meanwhile, in the engineering section, the experimental warp drive continued its subtle deterioration. Raj had identified the problem 3 weeks earlier, microscopic fractures in the quantum stabilizers that couldn't be repaired with onboard resources. Rather than report this to command and risk aborting the mission, he had quietly recalibrated the drive to operate at 92% efficiency. Each night, when the shift changed, he slipped into the drive chamber and performed the adjustments manually, buying them another day of travel. His calculations suggested they would reach Cerulean Prime before catastrophic failure, but with no possibility of return journey unless they found advanced materials to rebuild the drive. He hadn't shared this information with anyone, not even Eleanor. The crew had committed to this mission knowing it might be one way. No sense in confirming what many already suspected. In her quarters, Eleanor reviewed the latest Cerubian transmission, sent 2 weeks after they'd departed Earth. The message was fragmented, distorted by some kind of interference, but one phrase came through clearly. They are accelerating. Please hurry. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of billions of lives settle across her shoulders. The Prometheus wasn't just racing against mechanical failure. They were racing against extinction. The Cerubian medical facility gleamed with technology that seemed both advanced and oddly primitive to Eleanor's trained eye. Crystalline diagnostic equipment hummed with resonant frequencies, yet basic surgical tools were conspicuously absent. Your species' resilience is remarkable, the Cerubian physician Malus observed, analyzing the human's biorhythms. Your cellular repair mechanisms operate at rates we haven't seen in our genome for millennia. Side effect of keeping our aggressive impulses, Dr. Sato replied. Rapid healing evolved alongside our capacity for violence. Malus's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Embarrassment, Eleanor had learned. An evolutionary trade-off we hadn't considered. In another wing of the complex, Xylith guided Commander Wei through holographic displays of the Voidborn attacks. The recordings showed the entities more clearly than anything they'd seen on the Prometheus, amorphous rifts that seemed to exist partially outside normal space, drifting through solid matter and leaving nothing behind. They began as individual entities, Xylith explained. Now they move as a collective consciousness. Each world they consume adds to their intelligence. Wei studied the tactical display. They have no physical form to target. Not in your conventional understanding, no. They exist simultaneously in multiple dimensional states. Then how do you know they can be stopped at all? Xylith's luminescent skin dimmed slightly. Because once, long ago, we drove them back. Later, in the provisional quarters assigned to the human delegation, Wei shared this revelation with Eleanor and the senior staff. Their ancestors fought the Voidborn before the genetic modification, he explained. Which means somewhere in their historical records, there might be tactical information they don't even recognize. Their entire society is built on the rejection of that knowledge, Amara pointed out. Even accessing those archives could trigger physiological distress for them. The conversation halted as a young Cerubian aide entered, carrying a tray of crystalline containers. The liquid inside glowed with an internal light, nutrient supplements calibrated for human consumption. The aide's hands trembled slightly in the human's presence, despite their best efforts to appear non-threatening. After the aide departed, Dr. Chen spoke quietly. They're experiencing what we would call collective trauma response. Their genetic modification has left them physically incapable of fighting, but the instinct for self-preservation remains. The cognitive dissonance is causing widespread psychological distress. They need us not just as warriors, but as proxies, Eleanor realized, to do what they cannot allow themselves to do. In the settlement's central archives, Raj had made a different discovery. Working alongside Cerubian engineer Morvai, he had uncovered schematics for technologies far beyond what the Cerubians currently utilized. These energy manipulation principles, he said, pointing to equations that sprawled across holographic displays, they're similar to our warp drive, but refined to a degree we couldn't achieve for centuries. From our pre-modification era, Morvai confirmed. We preserved the knowledge but ceased the development of technologies with potential destructive applications. But these aren't weapons, Raj insisted. These are shields, barriers, defensive systems. Our philosophers determined that the distinction was artificial. A shield powerful enough to protect can also be used to contain and suffocate. A barrier that repels can also be used to imprison. Raj considered the implications. Your society chose total vulnerability over the potential for misuse. We chose peace, Morvai corrected gently. And for 20 centuries, it served us well. Outside the archive windows, the alien sky darkened prematurely as distant atmospheric disturbances marked the Voidborn's approach. The entities were still days away, but their influence already reached towards Cerulean Prime, like tendrils of cosmic hunger stretching across the void. In the human's temporary command center, Wei gathered his team. We have 62 hours before first contact with the enemy. I need options, not theories, not philosophies. Actionable strategies based on Cerubian tech we can modify. As the human team dispersed to their assignments, Xylith observed them with a complex emotion her species had no name for. Something between hope, fear, and the unsettling realization that salvation might require embracing everything her civilization had rejected. Midnight on Cerulean Prime brought no respite from activity. The ancient defense complex, repurposed as a research facility centuries ago, now hummed with renewed purpose. In the central laboratory, Eleanor and Kavita worked alongside Cerubian scientists to decipher the quantum structure of voidborn fragments, their movements synchronized through hours of collaboration. The entity samples are degrading faster than we can analyze them, Kavita noted, adjusting the containment field. It's as if they resist being understood. A young Cerubian researcher named Tellis approached with new readings. We've identified a pattern in the degradation. The fragments are attempting to reconnect with the main consciousness, like severed neural pathways seeking to reestablish links. Eleanor looked up sharply. That suggests they maintain quantum entanglement across vast distances, a hive mind that transcends normal spacetime, Kavita theorized. No wonder conventional weapons fail against them. In the adjacent engineering bay, Raj's makeshift workshop had become a fusion of human ingenuity and Cerubian precision. The modified pulse generators were taking shape, but challenges remained. The power requirements are immense, he told Morvai, who was calibrating crystal focusing arrays. Even with your energy crystals, we can only sustain a disruption field for 12 seconds before burnout. 12 seconds may be sufficient, Morvai replied. We don't need to destroy them. Only create enough disruption for the quantum transmitter to establish communication. Raj paused. You still believe we can communicate with these things, after what they've done to your worlds? Morvai's luminescent skin pulsed softly. My ancestors' records suggest the Voidborn weren't always hostile. Something changed them, or provoked them. Across the complex, in what once served as a meditation chamber, Commander Wei faced a different challenge. The handful of Cerubians who had volunteered despite their physiological limitations were struggling with the most basic defensive exercises. I cannot hold this position, gasped a Cerubian named Valen, dropping the lightweight shield Wei had designed. My neural pathways refused to comply. Wei knelt beside him. You're fighting against 2,000 years of genetic programming. Don't try to be aggressive. Focus instead on protection. Protection, Velen repeated, his breathing steadying slightly. Imagine you're creating a safe space for the children in the evacuation shelter. You're not attacking anything. You're preserving something precious. This reframing seemed to bypass some of the Cerubians' mental blocks. Wei adapted his training regimen accordingly, emphasizing defensive postures and protective formations rather than offensive tactics. Late that night, as most of the complex rested, Amara made a breakthrough in the linguistic archives. The ancient Cerubian battle records weren't written in standard notation, but encoded in musical patterns, the very art forms she'd been studying aboard the Prometheus. She rushed to find Selith, who was conferring with Elder Thrax in the communication hub. The ancients hid their military knowledge in plain sight, Amara explained, playing a sequence of tones. What sounds like ceremonial music to modern Cerubians actually contains tactical information, frequencies, formations, timing sequences. Zilith's expression shifted through multiple emotional states. Our most sacred compositions, our war manuals. Not exactly. They're comprehensive survival strategies, including, but not limited to conflict. Your ancestors ensured the knowledge wouldn't be lost, even if your society rejected its purpose. The implications stunned Elder Thrax. For millennia, we've performed these sequences at our most important ceremonies, never understanding their true function. As dawn approached, bringing them one day closer to the Voidborn's arrival, the complex was briefly visited by an unexpected group. Cerubian children, evacuated from outlying settlements, were being sheltered in deeper levels of the facility. Several had slipped away from their caretakers, drawn by curiosity about the strange visitors. They found Commander Wei in a rare moment of solitude, reviewing tactical displays. The children's presence, their innocence and vulnerability, reminded him sharply of what was truly at stake. These weren't abstract lives to be saved, but real beings with futures that would be erased if the humans failed. One child approached, offering Wei a small crystal sculpture, a crude but recognizable representation of the Prometheus. The gesture transcended language and species barriers, communicating what words could not: gratitude, hope, and trust. The Voidborn's arrival transformed day into night as they spread across the upper atmosphere, their presence bending light itself. From the command center, the display showed the city's outer defensive barrier glowing brilliant blue against the encroaching darkness. Primary shield integrity at 62% and dropping, reported Lieutenant Chen, monitoring the energy readings. Rate of degradation is accelerating. On the perimeter, Wei's team had deployed in 3 strategic formations based on Amara's translations of the ancient musical battle codes. The modified pulse generators hummed with escalating power, their crystalline cores glowing white-hot. Team Bravo in position. Wei confirmed through the comms. Generators charged to maximum. Be advised. Eleanor's voice came through, tense but controlled. The Voidborn are demonstrating new behavior patterns. They're not attacking randomly. They're probing for weaknesses. Wei watched as tendrils of darkness extended from the main mass, testing different sections of the shield. They're learning, he muttered. Diaz, Martinez, shift to position Delta 3. They're concentrating on the eastern quadrant. Lieutenant Sophia Diaz acknowledged and maneuvered her shuttle toward the coordinates. The small craft, retrofitted with Cerubian crystal technology, skimmed along the inside of the barrier, its wake creating ripples of energy reinforcement. Commander, I'm detecting unusual readings at the particle level, Diaz reported. The Voidborn aren't just consuming energy. They're converting it somehow. Before Wei could respond, a section of the barrier fluctuated, destabilized by a concentrated Voidborn assault. Dark tendrils slipped through the momentary breach, reaching toward the city below. Breach in Sector 7. Martinez shouted. They're getting through. Execute pattern harmonic, Wei ordered, invoking the ancient Cerubian defense protocol Amara had deciphered. All 3 shuttles moved in perfect synchronization, firing their pulse generators at precisely calculated angles. The effect was immediate but unexpected. Rather than repelling the Voidborn tendrils, the electromagnetic pulses created a resonance pattern that trapped them in a holding formation, neither advancing nor retreating. What's happening? We demanded, watching the strange stalemate unfold. In the laboratory below, Eleanor and Kavita observed the same phenomenon on their monitors. The pulses are creating a quantum interference pattern, Eleanor realized. We're not harming them. We're communicating with them. Not intentionally, Kavita cautioned. This is like accidental static. We need the quantum transmitter to establish coherent communication. The momentary equilibrium shattered as the Voidborn adapted, their tendrils reshaping to absorb the pulse frequencies. The breach widened, and emergency alerts blared throughout the complex. Fall back to secondary positions, Wei ordered. Diaz, cover Martinez's retreat. Lieutenant Diaz acknowledged, maneuvering her shuttle between the advancing darkness and Martinez's damaged vessel. For 17 critical seconds, she held position, her generator creating a buffer zone that allowed Martinez to reach safety. Then her shuttle disappeared, engulfed by a sudden expansion of void matter. From the command center, they heard her final transmission. Not panic, but determined professionalism. Coolant system failing. Generator at critical mass. Tell Martinez he owes me a drink in the next life. The remaining teams regrouped at the secondary defensive line, where Raj had deployed the larger pulse generators. These devices, combining Prometheus technology with Cerubian crystals, created a more stable barrier. But Raj's expression made it clear this was only a temporary solution. In the central laboratory, watching the battle unfold on holographic displays, Zelith witnessed something that shook her deepest beliefs. The humans fought not with bloodlust or conquest in their eyes, but with disciplined protection. They risked themselves not for glory or dominance, but for people they barely knew. This is not the violence our ancestors feared, she whispered to Elder Thrax. This is something else entirely. The Elder observed silently as Wei coordinated the remaining teams, refusing to surrender ground despite overwhelming odds. No, he finally agreed. This is not mindless aggression. This is the protection of life, expressed through necessary force. For the first time in millennia, a Cerubian leader was reconsidering their species' most fundamental assumption, that violence in all forms was inherently corrupting. What they witnessed instead was sacrifice, coordination, and fierce determination in service of preservation. The emergency council session convened in the deepest level of the complex, 30 meters below ground. Holographic displays showed the Voidborn regrouping, their swarm patterns shifting into new configurations. They're evolving their tactics. Wei observed. The next assault will be coordinated. Amara had spent the 6 hours since the initial engagement analyzing both the Voidborn's movements and the ancient Cerubian musical patterns. She manipulated the three-dimensional display, overlaying the two datasets. "There's a correlation we missed," she announced. "The Voidborn's movement patterns follow mathematical progressions similar to Cerubian compositions, but inverted." Dr. Sen leaned forward, eyes widening. "Like a dark reflection. What if they're not just attracted to Cerubian energy signatures? What if they're responding to them?" Eleanor's mind raced through the implications. The genetic modification didn't just make Cerubians peaceful, it altered their fundamental energy frequency and created the perfect lure. Raj finished. "Your ancestors didn't drive the Voidborn away 2 millennia ago," he told Xylith. "They made your species invisible or unappetizing to them, until the modification became so embedded in our genetic code that it began producing the opposite effect." Xylith realized. "We became more detectable, not less." The revelation shifted the entire framework of their defense. If the Voidborn were attracted to specific Cerubian energy frequencies, then the solution wasn't to fight them. It was to redirect them. "We need to create a more compelling target," Dr. Sen insisted. "Something that mimics Cerubian life signatures but amplified beyond anything on this planet." "The Prometheus's warp core," Raj suggested. "If we recalibrate it to emit modified Cerubian frequencies, it could draw the Voidborn away." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Using their ship as bait would strand the humans on Cerulean Prime indefinitely. Wei voiced what everyone was thinking. Whoever pilots the ship would need to maintain a safe distance from populated systems. The Voidborn would follow, but so would the pilot. "I'll do it," offered Valen, the Cerudian who had struggled most visibly with the combat training. "My people caused this. I should be the one to." "You wouldn't survive the first jump," Wei interrupted, not unkindly. "The ship requires human neural pathways to navigate through Voidborn-dense space. The pilot would need combat reflexes." Before the debate could continue, alarms blared. The secondary barrier was failing in multiple sectors. "We don't have time for a committee decision," Wei stated. "Get the quantum transmitter ready and prepare the ship. I'll pilot it myself." As the room emptied, people rushing to their emergency stations, Xylith approached Wei. "Why would you sacrifice yourself for our world? You barely know us." Wei's expression remained unreadable. "On Earth, I was known for making hard decisions that cost lives. This time, I only risk my own." In the quantum laboratory, Eleanor and Kavita made a final desperate push to complete the transmitter. The device, combining Cerubian crystal technology with human communication systems, might allow genuine interaction with the Voidborn, if they were indeed intelligent as theorized. "We're missing something," Eleanor muttered, reviewing the data from the first engagement. "The Voidborn adapted too quickly to our pulse frequencies. That suggests not just intelligence, but familiarity," Kavita finished, as if they recognized the technology. Eleanor froze, then hurriedly accessed the ancient Cerubian archives. What if the Voidborn aren't invaders at all? What if they're returning? She extracted a historical fragment, a partial record of the pre-modification era. The translation was incomplete, but one phrase stood out clearly. "The schism created two peoples from one, those who embraced flesh, and those who transcended it." "They're not alien invaders," Eleanor whispered. "They're your ancestors." Across the complex, Amara made her own breakthrough, deciphering a musical sequence previously thought to be ceremonial. When translated through the battle code matrix, it revealed instructions for reintegration, a way to communicate with the entities now called Voidborn. The two discoveries, reached separately but simultaneously, converged on a single staggering possibility. The Voidborn weren't consuming Cerubian worlds out of malice, but in a desperate attempt to reconnect with their severed kindred. The final preparations unfolded with methodical urgency. On the Prometheus, Raj completed the warp core modifications, recalibrating its output to emit the specific frequency that would attract the Voidborn. The navigation system is programmed with coordinates for the intergalactic void, he told Wei, who was checking the ship's manual controls. Once you clear the solar system, engage the quantum beacon. Wei nodded, his expression betraying nothing of the fear or doubt another might feel. How long will the core maintain integrity at these output levels? 72 hours, maximum. After that, Raj trailed off. After that, it won't matter. Wei finished. He secured the final system check and sealed the engine room. What's the status of the quantum transmitter? Eleanor and Dr. Sen are bringing it online now. If their theory is correct, it might establish communication with the Voidborn before you lead them away. Wei allowed himself a brief smile. Always good to have a backup plan. In the central laboratory, Eleanor and Kavita calibrated the transmitter while Amara programmed the ancient reintegration sequences. The device hummed with increasing power as cerubian crystals amplified the signal. Transmission range will be limited, Kavita warned. Perhaps 10 kilometers. The Voidborn would need to be directly over the complex. They will be, Eleanor said grimly. The outer defenses are collapsing. We'll have our chance to communicate, but only briefly before they overwhelm us. Zilith entered with Elder Thrax and a delegation of Cerubian scientists. They carried an artifact Eleanor hadn't seen before, a crystalline matrix of extraordinary complexity. The complete genetic record of our species, Zilith explained, before and after modification. If the Voidborn truly are our transcended ancestors seeking reconnection, they should receive this. The artifact was carefully integrated into the transmitter, its billions of data points enhancing the communication potential. Outside, the sky darkened completely as the Voidborn descended through the final defensive barrier. Throughout the complex, evacuation protocols shifted into their final phase. The remaining civilians moved to heavily shielded bunkers deep underground. On the command deck, the confluence of two plans, communication and evacuation, created organized chaos. Wei prepared to board the Prometheus for its final journey while the quantum transmitter powered up to maximum capacity. Commander, Eleanor called, crossing the deck to reach him. We might not need the diversion. If the transmitter works. If, Wei emphasized. I'm not risking an entire civilization on a theory, no matter how elegant. He checked his chronometer. The Prometheus launches in 20 minutes. You have until then to establish communication. As Wei turned to leave, Zilith approached him with a small crystal pendant, similar to the one she had given him earlier, but this one pulsed with an inner light. A beacon, she explained, tied to Cerubian emergency frequencies. If by some miracle you find yourself in need of rescue. Wei accepted it with a formal nod, understanding the gesture's significance. The final countdown began as the Voidborn breached the inner defensive perimeter. Dark tendrils probed the complex's upper levels, dissolving structures on contact. In the transmission chamber, Eleanor initiated the ancient reintegration sequence as the quantum transmitter reached full power. The effect was immediate and unexpected. The nearest Voidborn tendrils paused, then slowly shifted from destructive consumption to exploratory movement. The musical mathematics of the ancient code created visible patterns in their amorphous forms. They're responding, Amara whispered. On the Prometheus's bridge, Wei received the transmission update, but continued launch preparations. 20 years of combat experience had taught him a fundamental truth. Hope was not a strategy. The ship's engines ignited as the quantum transmission reached its peak intensity. For 7 critical seconds, the future balanced on a knife's edge between two possibilities, communication or evacuation. Then, just as the Prometheus began to rise, a tendril of void matter extended directly into the transmission chamber, not to destroy, but to connect.